"I will break you in bed," whispered the millionaire. On the wedding night, she fell in love. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It began with an offer that sounded like a threat. "Marry me," said Robert Ant, the youngest billionaire in New York. Think of it as a contract. The lights of the Manhattan skyline flickered through the glass walls of the penthouse suite. Rain streaked the windows like veins of silver. Across the marble table sat Mia Thompson, a 25-year-old freelance designer whose clothes looked too thin for the winter night. Her fingers clutched the edge of a chipped purse, and her eyes kept darting toward the door as if she could still run. Robert watched her with the stillness of a hunter. 3 months, he said. No romance, no expectations. You will be my wife on paper. In return, I will pay off your debts and fund your mother's treatment. Mia laughed softly, almost bitterly. That is the strangest marriage proposal I have ever heard. It is not a proposal, Robert replied. It is a solution. Quote. She stared at the envelope he slid across the table. Inside was a check worth more than everything she had earned in 5 years. The ink shimmered under the warm light. This is insane, she whispered. So is dying poor, he said calmly. The words hung in the air like smoke. The arrogance in his tone made her blood boil, but the desperation in her heart kept her rooted to the chair. She wanted to walk away. Yet somewhere beneath the fury, curiosity stirred. Why her? Why now? Robert leaned back, his expression unreadable. You are loyal. You are unknown. And you do not scare easily. I need someone who looks at me and sees a man, not a fortune. Mia felt the heat rise to her cheeks. You could have anyone. I tried that, he said. They failed. The silence stretched. Rain drummed harder against the glass. In the reflection, she saw her own face, tired, pale, frightened, and behind it, Robert's cold eyes studying her like a puzzle he intended to solve. Finally, he said something that would later divide the internet. If I must be trapped in a marriage, I want a woman strong enough to break me. A line that half the audience would call arrogant, and the other half would call honest. Mia's pulse quickened. You think I could do that? He smiled, slow and deliberate. I think you already have. Outside, thunder cracked, making the floor vibrate. Inside, Mia's phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Your mother's bill has been paid. Treatment continues tonight. Her hand shook. You paid before I said yes. Robert stood, buttoning his jacket. I never gamble unless I know the outcome. Mia rose, her chair scraping the marble floor. You are unbelievable. He turned toward the window, his reflection blending with the skyline. Believe what you want, Mrs. Ant. The paperwork is already waiting downstairs. For a long second, she could not breathe. Then, almost against her will, she followed him. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing her fate with a soft metallic sigh. At that moment, she wondered if she was walking into salvation or ruin. When the doors opened, cameras flashed. A lawyer handed her a pen. Her name trembled as she signed. Robert's gaze never left her face. Congratulations, he said quietly. You have just made the most expensive decision of your life. The rain outside turned into a storm, thunder echoing like applause. Would you ever agree to a deal like this, even if it meant saving someone you love? Because Mia Thompson just did, and her story is only beginning. Rain always had a way of finding her. Even in the quiet corners of the city, it chased Mia Thompson like a memory that refused to fade. That night, after signing her name beside Robert Ant's, she returned to her apartment, a space barely larger than the art canvases stacked against the wall. The rent notice hung crooked on the door, bright red letters spelling final warning. Inside, the air was cold, the light bulb flickered weakly, and a pile of unopened envelopes sat on the counter. She slid down against the wall, clutching the pen she had used to sign the contract. Her hand still trembled. 3 months, she whispered to herself. 3 months of pretending. 3 months of living beside a man who believed everything could be bought. Her phone buzzed again. A text from the hospital. Your mother's condition is stable. She smiled today. Mia closed her eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. That small message was worth more than any check. More than pride. More than freedom. Flashback 2 months earlier. The same hospital corridor, Same sterile lights, the faint beeping of machines behind glass doors. Her mother had smiled faintly through the oxygen mask. "Promise me, Mia," she said in a voice so thin it barely reached the air. "Promise me you will not give up on your dream. Paint again. Live again." Mia had nodded, but tears betrayed her. "I will, Mom, I promise." Since that day, she had painted nothing. Her sketchbook lay unopened. The world had been reduced to bills, shifts, and survival, until Robert Ant appeared like a storm she never saw coming. When she met him at the hospital weeks ago, it had been an accident or fate, depending on who told the story. She had fainted after a double shift at the diner, collapsing right outside the emergency entrance. When she woke up, a nurse said a man had carried her in and paid the entire fee without a word. That man was Robert. At the time, she did not know his name, only the weight of his silence, the way he stood near the window as doctors checked her pulse, his watch gleaming under fluorescent light. He did not speak to her. He simply left a business card on the bedside table. It read, "Robert Ant, Ant Corp Holdings." She had rolled her eyes, thinking it was some arrogant rich man's guilt money. But the card stayed in her purse. It became a strange reminder that kindness could come from the most unlikely place, even if it was wrapped in arrogance. Now, sitting alone in her dim apartment, that card caught her eye again. Mia picked it up and turned it over. On the back, in clean black ink, someone had written, "When you are ready to start over, call." Start over, the same words her mother had said. The same words Robert had used when he called the marriage a solution. Fate or coincidence, it did not matter anymore. What mattered was that her mother was alive because of him, and she owed that debt. She walked to the window, watching the rain blur the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Robert was probably in his penthouse, drinking something expensive, believing he had won. She hated that thought, and hated even more that he might be right. Her reflection in the glass looked tired but sharper, as if a part of her had hardened overnight. "I can do this," she whispered. 3 months. I can survive anything for 3 months. Quote. She packed her sketchbook into a worn backpack, tucked her mother's photo inside, and took one last look around the apartment that had been both her prison and her shelter. By sunrise, she was gone. The cab ride to the Ant Corp Tower felt endless. Every stoplight, every flash of neon reminded her of how far she was from the life she once knew. When the car pulled up to the security gate, she hesitated. The guard scanned her name on the guest list. "Mrs. Ant." The title landed like a weight on her chest. "Yes," she managed to say, "that is me." As the gates opened, Mia realized she was stepping into a world that did not belong to her, a world where her heart was not part of the agreement. Do you think debt can ever turn into destiny? Because for Mia Thompson, it already had. The marble floors of Ant Corp Tower gleamed under the morning light like a mirror polished too perfectly. Every step Mia Thompson took echoed in the vast lobby, swallowed by silence and the faint click of her borrowed heels. The air smelled of steel, coffee, and control. Robert Ant was waiting for her on the top floor. His office overlooked the city, wrapped in glass and clouds. The skyline stretched behind him like a painting worth $1 billion. He did not turn when she entered. "Sit," he said simply. She obeyed, still clutching the worn strap of her bag as if it were a lifeline. "From this moment forward," Robert said, "you are my wife in every legal and public sense. We will appear together at events. We will live under the same roof. The contract lasts 3 months. After that, we walk away." His voice was steady, almost mechanical, but something in his eyes flickered fatigue, maybe, or something deeper that he would never admit. Mia asked quietly, "What happens if one of us breaks the rules?" Robert turned at last, his gaze sharp. "Then the one who breaks them loses everything." He handed her a folder, thick, heavy, perfectly bound. The title read, "Marriage Agreement, Confidential." She opened it slowly. Pages of clauses, signatures, and legal stamps filled her vision. The contract was real. Every word carved out her future in black ink. "No love," she read aloud. "No jealousy, no interference with personal affairs." Robert nodded once. "The rules keep it clean. No misunderstandings. You get what you need. I get stability." She frowned. "Stability? My shareholders," he replied. "They want to see a man who has settled down. Stability looks good in annual reports." Mia stared at him for a long time. "So I am a line item in your reputation." Robert's lips curved, not quite a smile. "You could call it that." She signed the first page. The sound of the pen-scratching paper was louder than it should have been. He watched her hand move steady, determined, a little angry. When it was done, he reached into his pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table. Inside lay two simple gold rings. "They are fake," he said, "but the cameras will not know." Mia hesitated. "You thought of everything." "I have to," he said. "In my world, mistakes cost millions." He slipped one ring on his finger. She did the same, feeling the cold metal press against her skin. For a brief moment, their eyes met. It was not romantic. It was something else, an understanding that they had both crossed a line they could never uncross. Robert broke the silence. "Our first public appearance is tonight. A charity dinner at the Waldorf. Do not be late." She stood, clutching the folder to her chest. "Yes, Mr. Ant." He corrected her instantly. "Robert, you are my wife now, at least in public." Her heart stumbled at the sound of it. My wife. The words felt heavy, foreign, wrong, and yet they echoed inside her like a challenge. Outside, the assistant escorted her to the elevator. Before the doors closed, Mia caught one last glimpse of Robert standing alone by the window, a silhouette against the skyline. He looked powerful, untouchable, and utterly alone. Down in the lobby, a group of employees turned to stare. Whispers followed her as she walked past. "That is her. The new Mrs. Ant." Mia forced herself to keep walking. She had chosen this. She had signed her name. The elevator reflection showed a young woman who looked composed but felt like she was walking on a tightrope with no net beneath her. When the doors opened to the street, the city noise crashed over her like a wave horns. Chatter, rain. She looked at the ring again. Fake gold, real weight. Would you ever agree to a deal like this, knowing the rules could break your heart before you even start? For Mia Thompson, the contract was sealed, but the real test of its limits had only just begun. The rain had stopped by evening, leaving the streets of Manhattan slick and shining beneath the city lights. The Waldorf Hotel glowed like a crystal palace, its chandeliers spilling gold through the tall glass doors. Inside, the ballroom hummed with music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne flutes. Tonight would be Mia Thompson's first public appearance as Mrs. Robert Ant. She stood near the mirror in the dressing suite, trying not to stare at her reflection too long. The stylist had turned her into someone she barely recognized. Her hair was pinned in a soft twist, her makeup subtle but flawless, and the satin gown shimmered like water under the light. For the first time in years, she looked like she belonged to the world that had once looked down on her. Robert entered without knocking. His tuxedo was perfect, his tie sharp, his posture impossibly straight. But what caught her off guard was not his appearance, it was his silence. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze running from her hair to the hem of her dress. "You clean up well," he said finally. Mia arched a brow. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" He allowed himself a small smirk. "Do not overthink it. Just remember your role tonight. Smile, say little, and stay close to me." She exhaled slowly. "I am not a prop, Robert." "No," he replied, stepping closer. "You are an investment." The words cut sharper than she expected, but she swallowed the sting. She reminded herself why she was here: her mother's treatment, her promise, her debt. She could handle being an accessory if it kept her mother alive. At the ballroom entrance, cameras flashed like lightning. The announcer's voice carried over the crowd. Mr. Robert Ant and his wife, Mia Ant. Heads turned. A murmur spread through the guests: curiosity, envy, disbelief. She felt hundreds of eyes measuring her, weighing her worth against his name. But when Robert placed his hand on her back, steady and deliberate, the whispers dimmed. Together, they walked forward, and for a brief second it felt real. Throughout the evening, she played her part flawlessly. She smiled, nodded, and spoke with quiet grace. Robert handled the investors with surgical precision, every word calculated. Yet every now and then, she caught him watching her when he thought she was not looking, an unreadable expression in his eyes. Halfway through dinner, a small accident cracked the surface of perfection. The sommelier slipped while pouring champagne, spilling golden drops onto Mia's wrist. The cold liquid ran down her hand. Before she could react, Robert reached out instinctively, taking her hand to dab it with his handkerchief. The motion was small, simple, but the room seemed to freeze for a moment. The photographer's flash went off. His touch lingered a second too long. When he realized, he pulled back, his jaw tight. "Careful," he said, his voice lower now. "You attract attention. Maybe that is what you hired me for," she whispered back. He looked at her then, not as a CEO, not as a man controlling a deal, but as someone seeing another person for the first time. For the briefest moment, the air between them changed. Later that night, after the dinner, they walked through the lobby side by side. The cameras were gone, the crowd dispersed. Only the echo of their footsteps filled the corridor. "You did well," he said quietly. "I did what I was paid to do." Robert glanced at her, something flickering in his gaze again. Pride, maybe, or regret. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, she said. You wanted an image. I gave you one. As the elevator doors closed, their reflections stood side by side in the mirror, two strangers bound by paper, pretending to be something they were not. Yet behind the pretense, something unspoken began to take root. When the elevator stopped at the penthouse floor, Robert turned slightly toward her. "Good night, Mrs. Ant." Mia met his eyes and replied softly, "Good night, Robert." Her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. Can a lie ever start feeling real if you repeat it long enough? Because for Mia Thompson, the performance had just started to blur into something dangerously close to truth. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Ant penthouse, soft but sharp enough to reveal the quiet tension that lived there. Mia Thompson stood by the breakfast table, untouched toast growing cold on her plate. Robert Ant sat across from her, reading the newspaper as if they were any ordinary couple beginning an ordinary day. Except nothing about them was ordinary. Their photo from the gala was on the front page of 3 different magazines. The headline read, "Robert Ant's Mysterious Wife Stuns New York." Another article speculated that she was an artist turned socialite overnight. Mia sighed. "They make it sound like I am part of a fairy tale." Robert folded the newspaper neatly. "That is the point. A believable story sells better than truth. Except I am not a story," she said, her voice steady but tight. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Then stop reading the papers. They are for people who do not understand how the world works." His tone carried the calm confidence of a man used to being obeyed, but Mia had lived too many years fighting her own battles to stay quiet. "Maybe that is why your world feels so empty," she said. Robert's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Instead, he rose from his chair and straightened his cufflinks. "We have another event tonight, Ant Corp's quarterly gala. The investors will expect you there." She frowned. "Another one?" "Yes," he replied. "You are part of the presentation now." Later that evening, Mia found herself once again walking beside him through another crowd of polished smiles and expensive perfume. The ballroom this time was even grander than before, crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and a string quartet playing something elegant but hollow. She followed Robert's lead as they greeted his partners and board members. Most looked at her with polite curiosity, their questions dipped in sugar and disbelief. "So, Mrs. Ant," one woman asked with a smile too wide, "what is it like being married to New York's most eligible billionaire?" Mia smiled back, her voice calm. "Unexpected." The woman laughed, not realizing Mia meant every word. When the speeches began, Robert took the stage. He spoke flawlessly about company growth, innovation, and building a legacy of trust. But when he said the word trust, his gaze drifted toward her, only for a second. Mia's chest tightened. In that moment, she remembered his words from their first meeting. "I need someone who looks at me and sees a man, not a fortune." She wondered if he saw her as a person now, or just another part of the illusion he had created. When his speech ended, polite applause filled the room. But as the crowd turned back to their conversations, a journalist approached her, recorder in hand. "Mrs. Ant," the reporter said, "people are curious about your marriage. Some say it is a publicity stunt. Others claim it is real. Which is it?" Mia froze. Every instinct told her to walk away. But then she saw Robert watching from across the room, waiting for her answer. She smiled, her voice calm and clear. "Love and business are not so different. Both are built on trust. You can decide for yourself which part of ours is real." The reporter blinked, unsure how to respond. Then he lowered the recorder, visibly impressed. Across the room, Robert's expression softened just slightly, but enough for her to notice. As the night ended, they rode the elevator up together in silence. The air between them was different, now less cold, less distant. "You handled that well," Robert said finally. "I told the truth," Mia replied. He glanced sideways at her. "That was not the truth. That was diplomacy." "Maybe they're the same thing," she said quietly. Robert smiled faintly. "You surprise me, Mrs. Ant." Mia looked down at the ring on her finger, the fake one that suddenly felt heavy. "You surprise me too," she whispered. When the elevator doors opened, Robert stayed still for a moment, his eyes on her face. Then he said softly, "Good night, Mia." For the first time, he did not call her Mrs. Ant. "Do you believe real feelings can grow from a fake marriage?" Because for Robert and Mia, the line between act and emotion was already starting to disappear. The following week, the city seemed quieter, though the world around them had grown louder. The tabloids were relentless, dissecting every glance. every photo, every touch between Robert Ant and the woman who had gone from obscurity to fame overnight. Yet inside the penthouse, silence ruled. Mia Thompson had started waking before dawn, slipping into the glass-walled studio Robert had built but never used. She painted again for the first time in months. Soft strokes, pale colors, the beginning of something that might become whole. It was the only space in that apartment where she still felt like herself. One morning, Robert found her there. He stood at the doorway, still in his suit, tie loosened after what must have been another sleepless night. For a man who commanded boardrooms, he looked strangely hesitant. "I did not know you still painted," he said. Mia did not turn. "I stopped when life stopped making sense." Robert stepped closer, eyes scanning the half-finished canvas. "Does it make sense now?" She shrugged. "Some days. Today, maybe." He paused before saying quietly, "You are good." The compliment sounded foreign coming from him, stripped of arrogance, genuine in a way that startled her. She looked up, unsure how to respond. Their eyes met, and for the first time since signing that contract, neither of them looked away. Later that evening, Robert invited her to dinner on the terrace, a simple meal. No photographers, no investors, no audience. Just the sound of the city below and the glow of candlelight flickering between them. "You do not have to do this," Mia said, her tone cautious. "Do what? Pretend that this is something it is not." Robert leaned back, studying her. "Maybe I am not pretending." The words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. She laughed softly, trying to deflect the warmth rising in her chest. "You really should be careful saying things like that. Someone might believe you." "Do you?" he asked. Mia's smile faltered. "I am not sure I believe myself anymore." The dinner passed in silence after that, but it was not the cold silence that used to fill their nights. It was something different, something alive. When the wind picked up, she shivered. Robert stood, walked behind her, and placed his jacket around her shoulders. His hand lingered for a moment, long enough for her to feel the steadiness of his pulse through the fabric. "Thank you," she said quietly. He looked at her with a kind of vulnerability she never thought him capable of. "Do not thank me, Mia. You have done more for me than you realize." She frowned. "I do not understand." Robert sighed, turning his gaze toward the skyline. "For years, everything in my life was a calculation. Deals, mergers, numbers. You were supposed to be another transaction. But somehow, you reminded me what it feels like to mean something again." Mia's breath caught. "Robert," he shook his head, almost smiling. "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." They stood there for a while, the city lights blinking below them, the sound of distant traffic blending with the rhythm of their unspoken thoughts. When they finally went inside, Mia paused at the doorway to her room. "Good night, Robert." He stopped halfway down the hall, his voice low. "Good night, Mia." After he disappeared into his study, she leaned against the wall, heart racing. The fake marriage was no longer just a performance, it was becoming dangerous in ways she could not control. Later that night, she opened her sketchbook and began to draw him, not as the billionaire the world saw, but as the man who had looked at her on the terrace with something almost human in his eyes. She closed the book quickly, as if afraid of her own heart. Do you believe real feelings can grow from an agreement signed in ink? Or are they doomed from the start? For Robert and Mia, the answer was beginning to blur between truth and illusion, and neither of them could stop it. The next morning began with headlines that shattered the calm they had built. Mia Ant, the fake bride of New York's billionaire. The words blared across every news screen, every tablet, every phone. The article included photos, grainy, stolen shots of the marriage contract she had signed weeks ago. Her signature was clear. The date, the company seal, everything. Mia Thompson froze as the elevator doors opened to the Ant Corp lobby. Dozens of reporters waited, their microphones like weapons. "Mrs. Ant, is your marriage real? Did you marry for money? Was this all a business move?" Flashes exploded around her face. Her pulse raced, her throat dry. Security rushed forward, blocking the swarm. She heard someone shout her name, but the sound drowned in chaos. Upstairs, in his office, Robert Ant was already standing before a row of screens, displaying the news coverage. His assistant stammered, "Sir, the board wants a statement. They say this could affect the merger." "I know," Robert cut him off, his tone sharp. "Leave us." When Mia entered, the look in his eyes was colder than she had ever seen. "Who did you tell?" he demanded. "I told no one," she said, breathless. "Why would I?" He slammed a document onto the desk. "Then explain this." Her eyes widened. It was a copy of the leaked contract. The same file she had returned to him for safekeeping. Someone from inside his company must have taken it, but his anger left no room for reason. "You think I would risk my mother's life for publicity?" she shot back, voice trembling. Robert's expression hardened. "You wanted attention. Now you have it." The words cut through her like glass. "You do not mean that," she whispered. He turned away, hands braced against the desk. "Right now, the only thing that matters is damage control. Stay in the apartment. Do not talk to the press. I will handle it." "And what am I to you now?" she asked. "A problem to manage?" He looked at her, eyes dark. "You were never more than that." The silence that followed was colder than any insult. Without another word, Mia walked out. By afternoon, her face was everywhere. News anchors dissecting her expressions, bloggers calling her a gold digger, strangers debating whether she deserved the humiliation. Her phone buzzed with endless notifications. She turned it off. She sat by the window in the penthouse, still wearing the ring that now felt like a shackle. The rain outside returned, soft and steady. It was the same sound that had followed her from the beginning. That evening, she packed a small bag. She left the ring on the marble counter beside the untouched breakfast Robert had ordered that morning. When the elevator reached the ground floor, she stepped out into the rain without an umbrella. Cameras flashed again, but this time she did not flinch. Across town, in a sleek boardroom, Robert faced a circle of executives demanding answers. One of them said, "If you do not deny the marriage, the merger dies." Robert straightened. "If I deny it, I lose the only honest thing left in my life." But by the time he left the meeting, it was too late. Mia was gone. He drove through the storm for hours, searching the streets he knew she used to walk. The coffee shop near her old apartment, the hospital where her mother was still recovering. Every place held her ghost but not her presence. Finally, he stopped at a red light and saw it a painting displayed in a small gallery window. A woman standing in the rain, hand reaching toward light she could not touch. The signature at the bottom read "MT." Robert's breath caught. He realized then what he had broken was not the contract, it was her trust. Would you forgive someone who stayed silent when you needed them most? Because in that silence, Robert Ant lost the only woman who had ever made him feel real. A week passed, but it felt like a lifetime. The storm outside had cleared, yet inside Robert Ant's world, nothing had calmed. Investors wanted statements. The media wanted confession. But all he wanted was the one person who had walked away. He stopped attending meetings. The office lights burned late into every night, but his focus was gone. On his desk lay a single object, Mia's ring, the same one she had left beside the untouched breakfast. It glinted under the city lights, like a reminder that no amount of wealth could buy back silence or forgiveness. His assistant entered hesitantly. "Sir, there is a gala tonight. The Hearts Rebuilt Foundation is launching the art exhibit you funded last quarter. The board insists you attend." Robert looked up. "The foundation?" "Yes, sir. It is being curated by local artists." The assistant paused. One of them signed the invitation, Mia Thompson. Robert's pulse quickened. He stood abruptly. "Prepare the car." That evening, the foundation hall was filled with soft music and the scent of fresh paint. The theme was rebirth through art. Paintings lined the walls, stories of struggle, healing, and hope. But at the center hung one piece unlike any other. A canvas painted in sweeping blues and silvers, showing a woman standing in the rain, reaching toward light breaking through storm clouds. The title read, "The Contract of Heart." Mia was there, standing beside her work, dressed simply in white. She looked calm, almost untouchable. When she saw him approaching, her breath faltered, but she did not move. Robert stopped a few feet away. The crowd faded, the music softened. For a moment, it felt like the world had stilled just for them. "I should have been here sooner," he said quietly. "You already were," she replied, her tone even. "You paid for this exhibit." He shook his head. "I did not mean this event. I meant here, in this moment, when you needed me to stand beside you." Mia looked down at the floor. "You were silent when the world called me a liar." "I was wrong," he admitted. "I thought silence would protect you. Instead, it destroyed us both." "You cry." The sincerity in his voice cracked through her defenses. But the memory of betrayal was still raw. "You cannot fix everything with an apology, Robert." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, the original marriage contract. "I know. That is why I am rewriting it." She frowned, uncertain. "What is this?" He unfolded the paper, revealing one single line written in his handwriting. Clause 1. Love is real. Gub. The crowd around them began to notice, whispers spreading through the room. Cameras clicked, But for once, Robert did not care. "I built my life on numbers," he said, his voice steady. "You showed me something no equation could measure. I am not asking you to come back for a contract. I am asking you to come back for me." Mia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She wanted to believe him, but the wound still ached. "And if I say no, then I will still be here," he said softly. "Because for the first time, what I want has nothing to do with winning." The audience had gone silent. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Mia stepped closer. "You said once that mistakes cost millions," she whispered. "I think this one cost you something more." Robert smiled faintly. "It did, but for the first time, I am grateful." He took the ring from his pocket and held it out. No cameras, no contracts, no pretense, just a man and the woman who had changed everything. The moment stretched between them, fragile and real. Would you have taken his hand after all that silence? Because in that crowded gallery, under the soft hum of music and whispers, Mia Thompson finally reached for his, and this time, it was not part of a deal. It was a beginning. A year later, the city no longer whispered their names with scandal but spoke them with awe. The rain had long stopped being a symbol of chaos and had become a quiet memory of everything that had once broken them and everything that had made them whole again. The rooftop of the Ant residence was draped in white lilies and golden lights. The evening breeze carried the faint sound of piano music, and beyond the glass terrace, Manhattan sparkled like a promise kept. Tonight was not another charity event, not another business celebration. It was their wedding day, the real one. Mia Thompson stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the lace veil that framed her face. The reflection staring back no longer looked like the frightened girl who had once signed a contract in desperation. She looked calm, sure, and radiant. Her mother sat nearby, a soft smile on her face, tears glistening in her eyes. "You kept your promise," her mother whispered. "You started over." Mia smiled, taking her mother's hand. "I did, and this time it is real. You die." Outside, Robert Ant waited beneath a canopy of soft lights. The man who had once lived behind glass walls now stood open, vulnerable, his expression gentle. When he saw her step through the doorway, his breath caught. "You are late," he teased quietly. She smiled. "You would not have waited if you did not want to." He laughed softly, the sound low and warm, and offered his hand. "You have no idea how long I have waited for this. Go." The ceremony began with only a few close friends and the quiet hum of the city below. The officiant spoke simple words, but neither of them really heard. Their eyes never left each other. When it came time for vows, Mia spoke first. Her voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of their journey. "A year ago I signed a contract I did not believe in. I thought love was just another illusion people used to survive disappointment. But then I met you, a man who believed he could control everything and ended up losing himself to something real. You taught me that love is not a transaction. It is a choice we make every day, and I choose you." Robert's voice trembled slightly as he responded. "I spent years building walls, thinking safety meant control. But you walked through every wall I built and showed me that real strength is not in power, it is in trust. I once told you that mistakes cost millions. But loving you is the one mistake I would make again and again." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she smiled. It was no longer the fake gold band from that old contract. It was a simple silver ring, engraved inside with two words: "Love is real." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the guests cheered, but the world seemed to fade for a moment. It was just the two of them, surrounded by soft rain beginning to fall again, almost like the sky was remembering. Later that night, they stood on the same terrace where everything had once begun. The city stretched beneath them, vast and alive. Mia leaned against his shoulder, her voice barely above a whisper. "You once said you wanted a woman strong enough to break you," Robert smiled. "And you did. But you also put me back together." She laughed softly, the sound blending with the rain. He took her hand and guided her to the corner of the terrace where a glass frame hung on the wall. Inside were two small objects, a rusty apartment key and the first fake ring she had worn. Underneath, an inscription read, "Home, finally." Mia looked up at him, eyes bright. "We really made it." Robert kissed her forehead gently. "No contracts, no conditions, just us." For the first time, the city lights reflected not power but peace. Do you think love can truly begin from a lie? Because for Robert Ant and Mia Thompson, it did, and somehow, that lie became the most honest truth of their lives.